Hello, everyone. This is the Grace Hour Show, our podcast coming to you live from Baltimore. And I'm Pastor Steve Andrulonis with Greater Grace Church of Baltimore. And with me today is Philippe Serradji. And we have a discussion today on the book of Daniel and spiritual warfare. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about the essence of prayer and the power of prayer. And also, this passage in Daniel really indicates, it lifts the veil a little bit on something that's happening in the unseen atmosphere, in the cosmic atmosphere, involving angelic creatures who were made by God of a certain order with certain limitations. And we know that they don't multiply. Jesus told us that. They aren't given in marriage, which gives you an indication of the franticness of Satan and his designs and the way that he operates in terms of protecting his turf. He is the prince in the power of the air. He has created a world system that is built on deception and lies, murder, death, and also an emphasis on getting people not to focus on who God is, and keeping them from recognizing and having a relationship of integrity and order with the Creator. So, what do you want to start out with here, Philippe? You were talking. We were talking before, and we're talking about the hindrances. We're talking about the dynamic here of, we were talking about two people. We have Job and we have Daniel. And we have Job who went through a very torturous situation, and we have Daniel who has lived a life that has been one of privilege and influence in a heathen kingdom. But they both had two different experiences with the realm of Satan. Right?
Yeah, I mean, so as you said, this week we're discussing spiritual warfare, and I think Daniel 10, which is our chapter.
Our assignment, right?
Yeah, our assignment for today, and the delayed answer. And you rightly pointed out the connection between Job and Daniel by showing that they are both, their lives are both impacted by the spiritual warfare, So maybe just to recap the story here in Daniel, he prays, and then he figures out later, because he has a revelation from Gabriel, that his answers were on the way, but they've been delayed for 3 weeks, and we'll talk about that in a moment. 3 weeks, right? Is it
21
days. Yep. And on the other hand, but he gets an explanation of why. So he gets a window open on a light shine on the spiritual warfare, which doesn't happen to Job.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't get any. We do, because we read the story, but he didn't read the story.
No.
And obviously, he was not privy to the particulars of his situations, where the devil was the one behind, bringing up, what he could do to Job when Job brought him his name. So what's interesting is, in both stories, we do know that spiritual warfare is real.
Yes.
And it affects our lives. And on the other hand, what we don't want to do, though, is think that spiritual warfare has any capacity to influence us in any way outside of God's sovereignty. That is not possible.
Yeah.
The only point we could discuss about as well is the fact that, obviously, since the Bible does not give us a lot of details, then you and I end up with conjectures. And so you have to take our word as opinions and not thus says the Lord. But I think you and I, we have a combined decades of studying the Bible that gives us some confidence. And the last thing is, I read a commentary, I made that point, just want to get that out of the way. I read a commentary which I think it's wrong. It says where, God was waiting for Daniel to humble himself, based on verse 12, before he was actually allowed to release, the prayer. Actually, it's not true, because in verse 12, it does say that on the day one, he was humbled before God and he asked for the prayer, which triggers the idea that spiritual warfare is real, but we shouldn't have introspection by thinking, oh, God does not answer my prayers because there's something wrong with me. Though there is sometimes both Peter and James tell us that our prayers can be hindered, as a husband because of the way we treat our wives, or James might point out that we don't believe, or we don't have the right heart attitude. But I just want to get that out of the way and saying, okay, yes, let's not be introspective. Let's be humble before God, as Daniel was, and let us leave the delaying, or the timing rather, of the answer up to Him. Right?
Yeah. So, I think you're right. I would agree. I would say that whatever commentary you're reading, they're there with Eliphaz, Job, one of Job's three friends, the leader of Job's three friends, Zophar, Bildad, Eliphaz. They were talking to Job like, well, the reason why this is all happening to you is because there's something out of order in your life. And once you get that, and Job was saying, I could do, I think the great testimony to Job is he refused to do the religious thing that they were pushing him to do. Well, just admit that you did something wrong, but that would be like not integrity. I'm going to hold fast to my integrity. I don't know anything that's wrong, but I do know that God has allowed this. Yeah. I do know that there's a Redeemer. I know that I will see Him. I know when I come out of this, I will come forth as gold, though He try me, though He slay me, though He ruin me. So we know that Job is fighting in prayer. I think Job is addressing God. God is not answering him yet. And then God does show up at a certain point in Job 38. Daniel here, he's praying on his face. He knows that there's something going on with his people. And, Daniel's in a situation, he's a counselor to the king of Persia, of the Medo-Persia. He's a counselor to him. He was a counselor to the king of Babylon. So Daniel has had this place very much at the center of human government, a human government that was not submitting to the authority of God, but was yet under the authority of God. So all of Daniel shows us that God is sovereign in the workings of the kingdoms of men, and God allowed Daniel to be put in this place. So the point that you're making is addressed immediately. Daniel is addressed as the salutation. The salutation that Gabriel gives to Daniel is, "O Daniel, man greatly loved, understand what I'm going to speak to you." And I'm going to tell you things that may boggle your mind, but at this point, you've seen a lot of things that boggle your mind. You've seen, leopards, and you've seen, a great monstrosity. You've interpreted this thing, you've interpreted that thing. God has given you great wisdom, great responsibility, but you are a man greatly loved, and your prayers reached heaven. And, there's a dynamic going on that I can give you only a little piece of, right?
Yeah. I think it does say here, like, I speak to you, stand upright, for I know I have been sent to you. While he was speaking this word to me, I stood trembling of what has been. Then he said to me, do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before the Lord, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. So then he's going to explain why it's been delayed, which I think it's interesting here, because then he goes on, we can see verse 13 and 14, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me for 21 days, and behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia. Now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the visions refers to many days yet to come. So what do we know the story is? Actually, the Bible doesn't say much besides that.
Yeah.
What's the scenario? He prays, he gets heard, God sent an answer. Why did he send an angel? We don't know, but that's God's sovereign plan. Messenger, he says, and I think my conjecture, number one of today's show, is Daniel being a prophet, he gets revelations from angels, just like others have in the past. Like, the angel of the Lord has appeared to me, the Lord has appeared to me. So I think we shouldn't say God, taking from this passage and saying that God answers prayers through angels, that would be wrong.
Yeah.
He did answer to this particular prayer with an angel, because I think of the very ministry of Daniel as a prophet. That's being in the Old Testament. So that's why I understand. Maybe you have a thought on that. But the point being here is, so he gets the message, and then there is a fallen angel, most likely. I mean, that's what it says here.
Yeah, evil angel
Yeah, an
is
evil angel.
resisting Gabriel's progression.
Yes. Yeah, as he comes down from heaven with a message, which is interesting as well. It's like, and it shows that two things you and I spoke about. That angel being created beings, they are not infinite. They're not completely all-powerful.
No.
And they have to travel a distance in time.
Yeah.
And so he left heaven going down to earth. So he went from one place to the other. He entered the physical world. And he was delayed by another angel who was more powerful than him.
Yeah.
Which can be understood, as we said, because they're created beings. So I think my joke was, you've never seen in a ring, in a boxing ring, like a 6 foot 5, 300-pound man fighting a 5 foot 5, 120-pound man.
No, they have classifications.
Yeah, classifications.
You have heavyweight classifications, and you have featherweight classifications. Used to be, that's,
used to be, well, it's still
when
the case.
boxing was interesting to me.
It's not, well, that's another point. It's true.
Yeah,
boxing, it hasn't been that interesting in at least 30 years.
Since Sugar Ray Leonard stopped fighting, I
would
believe.
extend it to
Maybe
Mike Tyson.
After Mike Tyson, that's
I was
pretty
a Mike
sure.
Tyson fan when I was younger.
Yeah.
Anyway, so so the point here is that so there's this idea what that the angels can be hindered, but none of this actually mattered in the sense of God's sovereignty.
Yeah.
God could have sent Michael.
Yeah.
He didn't.
No.
God could have gone himself. He didn't.
He didn't.
He could have
sent Jesus.
He could have
as
sent
the angel
Jesus,
of the Lord. He could have sent a
Lord.
Christophany.
And guess what? The king of Persia could not have.
No.
So maybe Gabriel was chosen because he was going to be resisted.
Yeah.
And God knew that.
Yeah.
So all these things, in a way, puts us in the bigger picture, is that we would be mistaken if you and I think that we have anything to do that would influence one way or the other the spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
It's completely up to God. And
That's right.
the relationship we're going to make between Daniel and Job is that both instances, whether God reveals what's behind the delaying or what does not reveal what's going on to Job, in both instances, we have to be humble before God. Mm-hmm. Daniel knew it, so he didn't question whether he didn't get an answer. Job didn't know it, and he said later on he understood.
Yeah.
My ears have heard about you, my hands have seen you. In both instances, the spiritual warfare is left up to God.
Yes.
And I think this is very important for us to realize that.
And I think in both situations, we have to recognize the maturity development. Psalm 119 says the prayers are there in a couple of places. It was good that I was afflicted, that I might learn the statutes of God. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about a man like Daniel, we're talking about a man like Job. These are people who are famous in the spiritual realm that we don't see because, Satan, God said, "Have you seen Job?" And Satan says, yeah. He's really awesome because you protect him so much. That's happening in chapters 1 and 2 of Job. And here we have Daniel. We don't get a lot of insight into Daniel's life as a counselor to a heathen and pagan king who is the ruler over the people of Israel at this point in time. Absolutely. The people of Israel are subjects to the Medes and the Persian as they're led by a variety of different people. We see Esther fights a battle on a certain level in the throne room, in the palace. And now Daniel, we don't know what his role is. We know Mordecai became a great counselor to Ahasuerus after Esther's, going before him. And we know that, and we know that Daniel has a certain position for a reason. Mm-hmm. But what we do know is that it's wrong to say that the prayers were hindered. The prayers were not hindered. They went straight to God.
Yes.
The answer was chosen by God to come in this direct way, not in another way. Mm-hmm. And so the answer did not come until, and it could be that there is an element of, I don't know whether this is possible, but is there an element of growth and maturity that's happening within the angelic realm? Yes. Okay, so the body of Christ is my finger does not do what my kidneys do, to speak of organ very close to me. And since my wife has, diseased kidneys, but my finger can play the guitar, but it cannot filter the system, things that go through my system.
Yes.
So this is it. So Gabriel, it seems, because he shows up in Luke also to come to Mary and also to come to Zacharias. So we know that Gabriel is apparently a messenger angel, and the archangel Michael is of a different type. And like you said, a six, on the football field, the Ravens quarterback Lamar, he is a certain size. And then he has these larger people that keep other larger people from getting to him.
Yeah.
And so it's, Gabriel is the messenger.
Yeah.
And he is resisted by this prince. And there's this powerful element. And, the angelic realm has to submit to each other. We're studying in Bible college screw tape letters. And I'm looking at it, and I marvel at the way that C.S. Lewis has been given special insight onto the way that the selfishness among demonic atmosphere and the competition that goes on there. And so we know that, screw tape is instructing a junior tempter. And so they're learning more and more about how they can operate. So, I mean, that's, this is all, again, conjecture. Like you said, this is all imagination, and we're thinking about it. So, but I'm thinking we're given insight. Prayers are not hindered.
Yes.
They go straight to God.
Yes.
Answers, we may not recognize them. They may not be given to us until certain things are taken care of. And in this case, there's a resistance, and I think it's directly related. I am saying my opinion. I think it's directly related to, Satan having an issue with what's going on in Persia and the fact that God has allowed Hebrew boys to become counselors to these leaders. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego became a counselor. It changed Nebuchadnezzar's outlook. And then Daniel also. And now Daniel is still serving. Whether this is in the reign of Darius, it might be in the reign of Darius. And Cyrus. It's in the reign of Cyrus. So we know that Daniel is still there giving counsel. So.
Yeah, I think it's, so what do we know from the Bible? When we look at the spiritual warfare, there's many things we know in the Bible that are a lot clearer than the book of Daniel, and then we can apply to the book of Daniel. The first thing we know is that there's no contest with God. There's no creature. The devil himself could get his 10 best archangels, fallen archangels, the size of Michael. God wouldn't have to sneeze half a second; they'd be gone.
Exactly.
So if the third of the angels would decide to sneak up on God, if that was possible, because He's all-knowing, and God was turning His back, looking in one way, if that was possible, then it would take God 500,000 of a second for Him to end this thing. There is no contest, so we know that there's no hindering of God. And that's why I like the word you use. The prayer is delayed. It's not hindered.
Not hindered.
It goes up.
It goes
unhindered.
to God.
It goes to God, and then it comes back.
Because we're greatly loved.
Yes, and it goes back delayed, but not hindered, because it did reach its destination as God intended. So that's the first thing we learn from spiritual warfare. There is no contest with God. Number two, when God gives us a promise, as human beings, if Gabriel can't fight the king of Persia, I can't fight him either, because I'm obviously a lot less powerful than Gabriel. But he did say to Joshua, "Where I'm going to make you a promise, wherever you put your foot, I will give it to you." That's the second principle, I think, of spiritual warfare. There is no hindering of God's will in your life and my life. That's also a second important principle that we learn from scriptures. So obviously, that promise to Jacob to Joshua doesn't apply to me. I don't own everything I put my foot on. But if God calls you or I in a ministry, there's no hindering that either.
No.
And then I think the third principle, there's many others that I just want to point out, is that you and I were discussing earlier today, is that there is a very highly valued idea in the Bible, especially in the book of Psalms, that we don't like in the natural, which is waiting on God and hoping in Him. And that's a very important part that I think here is Daniel during those 3 weeks may have wondered, why didn't God speak to me? What's going on? God doesn't love me. And then he learned a valuable lesson. Next time when things don't come in my timeline, I can trust Him. So he learned a valuable lesson that applied to us. And I think sometimes what we miss as Christians, and it is there's two levels of waiting, not two levels, there's two aspects of waiting in the Bible. First, waiting on the Lord is ever present in scriptures. Waiting on Him, and that I think addresses one aspect of our lives where you and I, Christians in general, can be tempted to think of our relationship with God as a vending machine. I put my quarters in, I'm owed my candy bar. I put my prayers in, I'm owed an answer in my own timing. God is not interested in what we can get out of Him. He's interested in just this relationship. God is a loving person who loves a person, and He doesn't want to be loved by what we can provide for Him. But the other thing I think is another level of waiting. And we see that in, I think, Psalm 127. I would have to check that again, where David says, I'm waiting on the Lord. I'm waiting for a word for Him. And that's another level of waiting. God, I'm not waiting for God to deliver me. I'm waiting for God to give me a word in my trouble, which I think is something also. So all this for me, like the spiritual warfare, it's a big aspect of that as well. Like the devil wants us to mistrust God, because He's making us wait, and God wants us to trust Him because He's making us wait. Right?
Which is right. Yeah, which is what when we bring Job into the picture of this story, we know that Job, all the double portions of Job were not comparable to the fact that he knew God one way. Now he saw Him in a different way at the end of his trial. And another thing to think about, like when we're talking about the resistance that happens, I'm thinking of I'm reading the end of Mark 4, and I'm seeing this great wind, and, Jesus is on a boat with His disciples, and there's great resistance there, almost to the point where the boat sinks. The boys are very upset. They think they're going to die. They wake Jesus up. He stills the storm, be muzzled. And then He arrives on the shore. Satan was resisting the Son because the Son is going to go to a place that He has. I'm thinking this place of the Gadarenes, the Gerasenes, no one's quite sure. But this place we know that pig farming wasn't one of its great businesses. So we know it's also a pagan territory, it's a heathen territory, and Jesus is showing up to rescue one person, it seems like. And this is a big point, I think. Here we see this man inhabited by a legion of demons. Satan has sort of an influence in this territory, and Jesus shows up. And what happens? We see what Jesus does. And here's this man. This is the one thing that I'm thinking with this man. I love this story because it says that this man, filled with demons, still met Jesus on the shore. It's like something in him sparked him to go to Jesus on the shore. Like this is the limitation. We're talking about the limitation of the satanic influence in the situation. Once Jesus reached there, He's in complete authority, and they know it. And they whine, and they look at the swine, and they say, send us over there. Don't send us to some place where where we have nothing to do or something. I don't know, boredom? I don't know. The abyss is like total boredom. They fight each other all the time. I don't know. But we know that this happens. So I put those two stories together. There's a resistance on the water. Jesus wakes up, Jesus gets there, and there's no resistance. And we see that this is the power, like you were saying. There is no power that can resist the plan and the purpose and the omniscience and the omnipotence of God. And so now let's take a thing. We know Michael, it says Michael comes into this picture. And let's let the Bible comment on the Bible. When we see Michael and Jude disputing with Satan over the body of Moses, we see that Michael responds in a certain way. He says, the Lord rebuke you. He does not bring a railing accusation. Again, so the devil fights this way. Michael comes and he fights this way. Why is Michael sent? Well, we can see that, some commentators say that Michael is the archangel assigned to the Jewish people, to the nation of Israel. And he's like a general of the forces to intercede whenever it seems like the nation of Israel is in deep trouble. And it may have been that this Prince of Persia is planning something. Maybe this is all happening. This is all my imagination. Maybe this is happening during the days of Esther or something. I don't know. Or no, Cyrus is maybe before that. I don't know. But, before. There's a plan to eliminate. Maybe there was more than one plan to eliminate the Jewish people.
Yes.
And Daniel's laying on his face, just petitioning God, confessing, God, you got to do something. And the prayer is heard. And the Prince of Persia, the demonic angel, is instituting this. And then Michael comes to make sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking Michael was of a certain category of archangel. And we recognize his humility in this encounter with Job. He says, the Lord rebuke you.
Yes.
The Lord rebuke you.
And what's interesting here, because I want to build on what you're saying here. So he gets a promise, and the promise we know is there will be a succession of kingdoms. And then at the end, he says, 19, and he said, "O man greatly beloved, fear not, peace be with you, be strong, yes, be strong." So when he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, "Let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me." Then he said, "Do you know what I have, why I have come to you? And now I must return to fight with the Prince of Persia." On his way back to delivering the prayer, he still has to fight his way through.
Yeah, his fight came to Daniel, and he had to fight back. So
which strengthened the idea that we have an expression in France when somebody your belly button in French we call this nombril, which is somebody who is nombrilistic, meaning like it's self-centered in the idea. When you look at your own belly button, you're centered on yourself.
Your own navel, right? You're lost in your own navel.
Yeah,
okay, we can just create a figure of speech.
Yes, there. And this puts another layer of it. No, it has nothing to do with you, Daniel. You have the info, you get the prayer answered. I'm going back, and then we know why. And then I have to go forth. Indeed, and now I must read it. And then indeed, the Prince of Greece will come. Could it mean, conjecture number 3 or 4? Could it mean that the Prince of Persia knows he's doomed? Like this particular angel will be doomed, demoted by the devil, whatever that is, because he's going to fail. And then another guy will come up, and he wants to say, because if the angels are fallen in the same way that we are fallen, we are self-centered.
Yeah.
I don't think the Prince of Persia is as interested in worshiping and loving the devil as Michael loves God. Because if he's fallen like you and I, he wants to keep... I was going to say he wants to keep his place. I was going to say something else. Maybe I shouldn't have.
Yeah, it's all about competition on that side.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is
no wonder he's going to. Okay, you deliver the prayer, but you're not going back.
Yeah,
like how delusional we can be as well. In that way. So I think this is interesting for me because it shows another layer of the idea. None of this delaying prayer, spiritual warfare has anything to do with me in a sense. I'm aware of it, but there's nothing I can do but trust God.
Yeah.
And even if the Prince of Persia wants to fight back, so Gabriel wouldn't go. Gabriel will end up in heaven. We know that because he came back to announce Jesus' birth to Mary. So he's safe. He's fine.
Yeah.
And we don't know. We haven't heard about the Prince of Persia since.
Yeah. We haven't heard of him. No. Well, we know that the Prince of Persia and may have gotten, there's the Prince of Greece is mentioned here too.
Yeah.
So we know that, at a certain point in the days of Alexander the Great, there is he defeated Persia and he started, working his way across this region in order to take control. And then he wound up in India and then he died.
Yes.
And he was going to, spread the Hellenistic culture all across the world. That was Alexander. That's why there's so many Alexandrias. There used to be so many Alexandrias. I'm going to bring the philosophy that I learned from my teacher. And because the Greek culture is the ultimate culture,
Yes.
Because that's what Alexander was driven by, this kind of thing. So you could see the battle things that's going on between the Prince of Greece and the Prince of Persia. And, is this the way it is on hell's side? Like they just let each other beat each other up and then in competitions. I don't know. I've read a couple of books like that that seems to show that, demons can get selfish at certain points and spoil the best laid plans.
Yes.
Is that I think it can be. There can be like a total organization. And then once you get to this point of success, then all of a sudden there's infighting that happens because there's an ultimate competition that's going on there. And that's Lucifer Lucifer can have significant cooperation among the people that have chosen, among the angelic realm, the angelic forces that have chosen to submit to his power.
Yeah.
And he rules by power.
Yeah.
That's the way he rules, right? And, that's the thing. Like this Prince of Persia was ruling by power until Michael showed up. And Michael, I think the reason Michael is who he is because he doesn't exercise his authority in his own name.
Yeah.
That's the real thing. Lucifer wanted to exercise an authority, it seems, from the understanding of what's mentioned in Isaiah. He wanted to be as the Most High and exercise authority in his own name. And Michael, the very little bits of information we get, did not exercise his authority, even when it came to something significant like the body of Moses, because I could see this, right? Because it happened with the brazen serpent.
Yes.
The brazen serpent became a brass kind of idol to the people until Hezekiah crushed it. And but for all those decades and century, Nehushtan, the bronze thing, was still something that the people of Israel made offerings to. Maybe we don't know. It was destroyed. But when you think about where was I going with that? Lucifer wanted to be as the Most High. He wanted to have a measure of worship to him.
Yes.
But he was a made being.
Yes.
And that's why he's trying to keep Israel from being what it is and trying to control this atmosphere as best as he can.
Yeah. Because ultimately, that's what you're making as a point. Ultimately, and it connects to what we said earlier, like you and I have nothing to do with it in one way, except we're spectators. Sometimes we're privy, sometimes we're not. We have the Bible, so we know in both instances that there is a spiritual warfare that gives us an understanding of that may happen in our lives. But then at the end of the day, we have, and the Bible doesn't really say much on how the angels have been affected by their own fall.
No.
We know that death entered into the world because of our fall in that way. So we know that we have to work harder. We sweat for our food. There's labor pain. There's all kinds of things that we listed. That all we know is how ugly it became for the devil, how ugly it became for the angels. So could I see, again, conjecture number 5 or 6 or 7, I don't remember. But
we're probably up over 30 today.
At this point, we made so many of those, but we warned you at the beginning.
Yeah, we told you. We told you.
What we say with the salt, the grain of salt, okay, just think it through. But what we're saying here is so we have a group of unarmed, unchanged angels who, being finite creatures, had to grow in their worship to God. They had to grow. They had to learn more about God. The Bible says that the angels are looking down and trying to figure out the grace. So they are learning from God. They're in awe with God. And we see in Revelation, which is the end, they're worshiping God endlessly. We don't see that as much through the scriptures, but we see that at the end. So are they completely baffled? Did they learn something about God that they haven't known before? I do believe that. It's the case because they are not infinite beings. They have to learn. They have to grow. On the other side, you have a bunch of people who, as you said, and we go back to the created idea, the devil may be this huge guy that is stronger than anybody else, and nobody dares, to challenge him in that way. So do they serve the purpose of the devil with the same dedication that the angels would? I don't think so. Just like we it's the same thing. So that is for me the very idea of why the spiritual warfare has nothing to do with you and I. God has a plan.
Yeah.
The devil has another one. And for some delusional reason that I completely ignore, maybe the devil has not read the Bible. I don't know.
I think he's read it.
Yeah,
he just doesn't have the Spirit of God to interpret it properly.
So why is he keeping on fighting against God?
Because he's insane.
There you go. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, insanity is doing things again and again, expecting different results. You do the same thing. That's what somebody has to. I'm not sure who has defined that way, but when going back to what I was saying about I think like when Michael was disputing with the body of Moses, I could see like Satan getting possession of the body of Moses. He could turn that into an idol for the people of Israel.
Yes.
And God wanted to hide away that body. So that was it. So there you see Michael that's the thing. It's like we see Jesus in submission to the created order when he's on the earth. He constantly is submitting to the creative order. He doesn't turn stone into bread. He doesn't. Satan is violating the law of gravity, carrying him to this place. But Jesus is not like superseding this. He sees the prince and the power of the air, and he submits even to that. And it seems to me that if you read C.S. Lewis's fictional operations and his explanations, he comes to some, particularly with Screw Tape Letters and sometimes with the stories of Narnia, and then in his space trilogy, he gives some insight, with his fiction that there is the cosmic battle that is going on that we can't see, also has to be settled along the lines of God's decree. He's not going to step outside of the poetic order, the poetic way that he has structured things. So yes, it's very true that when Daniel prayed, the Son of God could have come at once and said, bam, this is the way things are going to play out. Yeah. But it wasn't. There's God set in motion certain things with his word, speaking things into being, and he's chosen not to violate the word. Yeah. So he chose, when Jesus became a man, he lived completely as a man and was obedient, right? Philippians, right? Uh-huh. Yeah, right? Obedient unto death. Yes. His body expired at a point of his choosing, but he was bleeding out completely. Yeah. And so, he committed his spirit to the Father. And so, but that's the thing. We are making up some things. Yeah. Not making things up. We are tying together the threads of Scripture to try and give sort of an explanation. And I think that does answer Jennifer's question here. Is like, I would say, God permits spiritual battles, and we may step into something because of our own decisions. Yes. That puts us, like you may. That's why I think it's very dangerous for anyone to sort of play with any kind of spiritism. Like if you go into a fortune teller, you are entering a realm that is demonic, and you could find yourself like sort of, under the assault of demonic forces, and those assaults aren't always like in your face. They're often very subtle, and you become very twisted because you put yourself into that. So our choices matter, right? Free volition does matter. Sovereignty of God is ultimate. Free volition does matter. He works all things together for good. So he permits spiritual battles, and we see that. You got to read, Jennifer, you read the book of Job. You know that when Satan asked what he could do to Job, God drew a very clear line in the first series of trials, and then he drew another clear line with the next series of trials. And so, yes, God is in control, but you could make a wrong choice, and suddenly you have put yourself in a situation. You choose to run a red light, you could become when you get T-boned by a car, you chose to run the red light. I chose to run the red light, and now I am a paraplegic. I mean, Joni Eareckson Tada chose to dive into shallow water, and she's been, a marvelous believer, but she's been crippled because of her choice that day. And God has chosen not to reconnect everything in her spinal cord. So.
Yeah, and I think maybe to stay on your question, Jennifer, I think so. God does not initiate everything in that way, but He knows everything. It means like, okay, I made a stupid decision that brings me into a place where that sparkles a spiritual battle in my life because I'm giving place to the devil. Completely true, but there is nothing beyond God's redemption. That's also true.
Yes.
So first, God is not surprised, so it's in His sovereignty, and God is not surprised in the sense that there's nothing he can do. It's not beyond his redemption.
Yes.
Well, the Bible says, and that's Oretta, maybe she's saying that God gives us the power to resist the enemy. That's true. But I just want to point out, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying true. But let's put the thing in order. James 4:7. Well, we know, everybody knows James 4:7 as resist the devil.
Yes.
But we forget the A part, which is submit to God, resist the devil, he will flee from you. And the resist to God only follows the submitting to the resist to the devil only follows the submitting to God, meaning that again, God's first.
Yeah.
Then we can do something, and then he will flee. And just like what allows Michael to put the prince of Persia back into his place is because the Lord rebuke you, as he said to Jude, not because. You see those muscles?
Yeah.
You want a taste of this?
No.
This is not Michael's approach, and that's exactly what you were saying as a point. The difference is in the angels versus the demons, that's this attitude, and that's exactly the same for me as a Christian. Am I coming in the name of the Lord that David did against Goliath? Or am I coming in the name of like you and I are working on a book together with Pastor Shatter on leadership principles. And I think we're discussing as, what I call the Copernican principle, which is in that way. And the goal of that
goes with your naval principle there. You got the two things.
I should go look at that. The point being is, I think sometimes we forget how our experience, our gifts and everything empowers us to do the work of God. But sometimes it also occurs because we think we can do it without Him.
Yeah.
So one example that I gave to the students when I talk about this is, okay, when I was the director of Marion Bible College, until 2 years ago, where I decided to pass on, the baton to Pastor Matt, was that it was the fourth Bible college I directed as a president or as a director in my 23 years span. Do I wake up in the morning when I was a director panicked because I don't know what I'm doing? No. I know what I'm doing. I know how to organize a semester. I know what the curriculum is. I know how to prepare classes. I know how to direct administration, direct staff, all these things. And that's good, but that's also the very reason why maybe when I first came to the office in the morning, I'm not depending on God because I know what I'm doing. And I think that's a good reminder in that way. Yes, we can resist the devil because we are submitted to God. And that's how successful we can be in spiritual warfare when we have to be. It's not because we are rebuking the devil, it's because we're telling the devil, God rebuke you. And that gives us the power to make that stand in our position in Christ.
That is a powerful point.
Yes.
I think that's a powerful point, and that's where we want to leave people with when we're talking about, because ultimately this is a story of prayer and prayer answered, and is prayer heard, and it's a question for us. And Gabriel is a key for us here because we see that Daniel received an answer. I am from the throne room of God, Gabriel said, and I have come to tell you this. Also, this is the same kind of language that Gabriel uses with Zacharias. Your prayer has been heard.
Yes.
And here's a man who waited, and his wife, his poor wife, she's like, feels the disgrace of her condition that she's never been able to produce a son for her man who is a priest in the temple, which is very important.
Yes.
And all of us, your prayer has been heard. And so just think about it. Daniel was resisted. Daniel's prayer, the answer, the visit from Gabriel in answer to Daniel's prayer was resisted for 21 days. How many years? Decades had Zacharias and Elizabeth been praying for a son, and Gabriel was not sent until that moment. I think you're right.
Yeah.
How do we resist the devil? By submitting to the Lord, and that's it. And then the devil, at a certain point, the devil had to flee from Job.
Yes.
Right?
Because
Any last comment?
Yeah. No, this is exactly, this summarizes what we've been talking about, is how the spiritual battle seems on my end, my perspective is, okay, I'm waiting, it's unfair. But as God is, and I think the Gabriel idea, like Zechariah and Elizabeth had to wait. And when you look at this, maybe the people of Israel, the world had to wait centuries.
Yeah.
Because it was not God's timing.
No.
As simple
the
as
fullness
that.
of times has to come.
For Jesus to be able to come to this day and die on that day, for some reason God had to do it this way. Elizabeth couldn't have a kid 30 years earlier. She couldn't.
No.
He had to be ready when Jesus was ready.
Yes.
And not Jesus was not ready, but in the sense like the timing of Jesus was ready. And Gabriel, he was it had to fight for 3 weeks to get to Daniel. Maybe he knew all the God's plan for 100 years, but he had to wait. He couldn't go on his own. No, there's a timing, and then that's also one thing that we can grow in as Christians, in trusting God, in waiting on Him, and also waiting on His timing.
That's right. Yep, and knowing that we're loved, greatly loved, and we are heard,
and we are heard and loved. That's a good word.
Right. And we thank you. That you have heard us and been a part of our podcast today, the Grace Hour Show. We want to remind you, if you're a subscriber, that's great. You can subscribe to this Grace Hour Show at YouTube and Apple and Google and Spotify. And we'll have a show tomorrow, continuing this theme on spiritual warfare. And so join us as much as you can. And so for Philippe Serradji, I'm Pastor Steve Andrulonis. Thanks to Jehu Vandiver for being our technical person today. And we want to ask God to bless all of you today, this Tuesday and the rest of the week. And you are heard. You are greatly loved. God is in control. Keep that in mind.